I've been seeing a lot of mid laners and top laners request to swap immediately upon joining Champ Select, both in my own games as well as some of the people that I coach. Whenever I see people that I coach do it, or at least interact with on Discord, I always try to convince them not to do that, for multiple reasons. I'm going to start off with the solo laner's perspective, and then I'll go into the perspective of the ally that you're trying to swap with. If you're a top laner or a mid laner, you have to consider, do you actually have a big enough champion pool to where if you get a later pick, it would be beneficial? You've got to be real with yourself. You don't have a champion ocean. Nobody does in solo queue, because if you're wanting to climb efficiently, you're not playing 10 different champs. But let's say you do genuinely play 2 to 3 champions pretty consistently and you feel confident in all of them. Are you going to be tempted to cook if you're 5th pick? If you are, you should not be asking to swap. If, however, you can stick to those 2 to 3 champions, regardless of what the enemy picks, then you can consider if it's good to swap. The last point is, do you have enough info to pick your champ? If you already know the enemy top laner or the enemy mid laner, plus some extra champions, so you know at least if it's decent into their comp or the matchup, whatever, then go ahead and pick your champ. Don't put your teammate in a bad position if you're already in a good enough position to pick for yourself. Now I'm going to talk about it from the ally's perspective. Getting counterpicked, it doesn't feel good for anybody. I know it feels really bad for mid laners and top laners because you're in an isolated 1v1 where it's a lot harder to avoid dealing with the matchup. But again, everybody has that problem. Even junglers, even though the other roles don't have to 1v1 nearly as much, they still have to deal with team comp counterpicks. Even though it may not be as harsh for the other roles in the early game, they still have to deal with mid to late game teamfight situations, or just in general enemy comps that are really hard to navigate. For example, when I'm playing jungle, some of the things that I'm worried about seeing when I'm wanting to pick Zac is, are they going to have a Syndra, a Janna, anything with some kind of knock-up, knock-back that can make it really hard for me to land my combo. Just seeing the jungler isn't enough for me to confidently pick the champion. Now, I may still do it if I get early pick in the draft and I don't really have enough information to request a teammate swap. But it's the same idea. Back to whether you should swap or not. Are you making the game harder for your teammate? If you are, then you better have a very good reason for wanting to swap with them. Is your teammate hovering a good blind pick champion? If they are, then maybe you should swap with them, or at least ask if they should swap, because they'd probably be fine regardless of what the enemy team picks. But if they're hovering something that would do a lot worse when blind picking, such as a Rammus, then you may want to allow them to pick later. When you're asking to swap, how much info is actually visible? Is it just the 1v1, just the 2v2? Or are there more picks that you know you're not going to put your teammate in a position where they're really uncertain on what they want? Basically, all that I'm saying is think about it from your teammate's perspective when it comes to swapping to decide if it's actually worth requesting. Don't do it immediately upon joining Champ Select. That is ridiculous. Just because you're a solo laner does not mean you have some divine right to get last pick, especially if you're a one trick. If you're a one trick, you should absolutely be picking earlier because you're going to lock in the same champion anyway.